Hi, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty there. I wanted to welcome you all today and do a little quote. And the quote is, "Life challenges are not supposed to paralyze you. They're supposed to help you discover who you are." And I just think that's a beautiful quote by Bernice Johnson Regan. And I think it really makes us think of, when we're struggling, what is the purpose of it and what are we all about? So today we have a fantastic show for you. Cheryl Kearney is with us, and Cheryl is living with Alzheimer's disease. And so she is going to share with us what her journey has been like and give us some tips and insights to help us better prepare for the future and in our lives and those we love who might be touched by this disease. For those of you who are new to the show, I want to give you a brief introduction to the Alzheimer Speaks Radio. Our goal is to give voice to those afflicted with memory loss and empower them to live purpose-filled lives. We want to raise awareness, give hope, and share real everyday life stories of living with Alzheimer's. Rick Phelps, our channel expert living with Alzheimer's, is also going to join us probably later in the show, but he's not with us right at this moment. Rick has been living with the disease since June of 2010, and he's the founder of Memory People on Facebook. Today, I am so glad that you've decided to join us, and hopefully you too will become an advocate on steroids for Alzheimer's disease by speaking out and giving voice so many others will learn the truth. Now, if you are listening by phone, you can always push 1 to get into my queue to ask a question of myself or Cheryl. Or if you are online, you can always just type something into the chat box, and I will try to grab that as well. So I want to introduce Cheryl to you. Cheryl, I got to know from Memory People, again, which is Rick Phelps' group on Facebook. And Cheryl noticed her memory problems back in 1999, and a seemingly simple task of looking for her daughter's baby pictures became a problem. And so she has come to join the conversation with us today and tell us a little bit more about, how her life has changed and how she's learning to adapt to living with Alzheimer's disease. So Cheryl, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, Lori.
Hi. So glad you could make it. I'm thrilled to death to have you with us here today. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Who is Cheryl Kearney?
All right. I grew up in a city in Massachusetts. I was the only daughter, had a younger and older brother.
Okay. And do you still live in Massachusetts now, or?
Nope, I live in New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire. Okay, wonderful. And do you have any certain types of hobbies or anything that you really like? Do you have children?
Yes, I have 3 children. My daughter is 29, and I have 2 sons, 21 and 25.
Okay, great. So yours are just a hair older than mine. I've got a daughter who's 23, so it's kind of fun to see them in that independent stage when they're really becoming their own person there. And what type of work have you done in the past, Cheryl? Did you work, or were you an at-home mom, or?
I stayed at home for about 8 years, and then I went back to work when my youngest son was about 3 and a half or 4.
Okay. And right now, do you currently work?
Yep, I work 2 jobs right now.
Okay. And what kind of jobs? Do you mind sharing with us? What type of work you do?
I work as a para-educator in a classroom, in a regular, classroom setting. And then I work as a cashier at a retail store, and because I live on my own, I have to work 2 jobs. During the school year, I work about 52 and a half hours a week, and it can be really challenging. Somehow I make it through.
Well, that's a lot of people are working a lot of hours these days, and 52 and a half hours a week, that's a lot of time. I I really credit you for doing that and being able to maintain on your own. I would think that your parent job's got to be fun with the kids at times.
It is.
What age group do you work with?
Usually elementary, third and fourth, and sometimes second. I prefer to be in elementary. I don't prefer to be in middle school.
Oh, I understand that one. I did a lot of volunteering as my daughter grew up, and elementary was just much easier to deal with. Very, very big difference there. How about hobbies? Do you have any hobbies that you'd like to share with us?
Well, whenever I'm home, my computer is on. I have Facebook up. I'm one of the administrators on Memory People Group. I was actually one of the first people on there with Rick back in November of 2010. I also enjoy bowling, photography. I have bird feeders outside my apartment that I love to watch. I love to go on walks, things like that.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Can you tell us a little bit about when you started noticing your memory problems? I made the note about you had shared with me when you were looking for baby pictures for your daughter's probably graduation book or something.
Yep.
I believe it was.
Yeah, that was probably as far back as I can get it back to fall of 99, only because I remember my daughter needing her graduation pictures, and that was fine. We went and had it done that summer without a problem. But I remember her wanting a baby picture for her yearbook, and I couldn't manage to get that done before the deadline. And she was pretty upset with me. We've talked about it since, and she doesn't remember, her being upset about it now, because it's been quite a while now, because she graduated in 2000.
Yeah, I know with my daughter growing up, there's times when she would be just livid at me, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to burn in her for the rest of her life. And then she's like, what are you talking about? I don't even remember.
I know.
But as a parent, you're horrified because you feel like you let them down,
Yeah.
And then it just kind of all blows over. Can you give us some other examples of maybe some symptoms that you had that made you start wondering about your memory?
Well, I think the first symptoms that I can remember were my children were complaining that I would always repeat the same things. Like, for example, they'd get home from school, and I would ask them if they had any homework. A short time later, I would ask them the same thing. Do you have any homework? Did you do it yet? And I wouldn't remember any of the conversations except the one I was just having with them. Once in a while, I would get lost going to places that I would usually know how to get to. Almost daily, I would have problems with word retrieval at school. During lunch with staff, I often would get stuck in the middle of a sentence, and I just couldn't find the word. So I'd stay stuck, and I couldn't finish the sentence. And it made me feel really bad, and I would just say to them that I was having some trouble remembering. At one point, I thought about eating lunch alone because I felt embarrassed and a little stressed out about this happening. But I'm very much a people person. I love to socialize, and I thought it wouldn't be good to isolate myself. So I continued to eat lunch with staff and still had the daily problems remembering words.
Well, I think that's really great that you chose not to isolate yourself, because I think a lot of people do, pull themselves out, and I think that social aspect is so important to keep engaged. Do you mind sharing with us, Cheryl, how old you were when you started having memory problems? Everyone's trying to figure out, when.
47.
47. Okay, so quite young. And I think, again, I appreciate you sharing that with us, because so many people feel that this is a problem of the elderly, and it's not at all.
No, it's not. Definitely not.
So thank you so much for sharing your age. A lot of people don't like to share age. So
no, it doesn't bother me.
Great. When you initially noticed some of the changes, did you share them with other people? Did you, like when you were talking with people at school and family members, what kinds of things, did you explain it, or did you kind of joke it away, or?
don't remember back then. I just remember the conversations with my children and my then husband complaining about, I just couldn't remember anything. And I just remember, growing up and everything, I never had a really good memory. You just often forget things. Some people had a better memory than others, and mine was just never that great. You just dealt with it. But then I started seeing changes in it and people actually bringing it to my attention. But I do remember, my hygienist, who I've seen for quite a long time, and I do remember that I don't remember whether I told her that I was having memory problems or whether she had, in fact, recognized that there was a problem. But I do remember going to this presentation about memory problems and getting the whole process of getting diagnosed. And as I sat there, I realized that I probably did have something wrong with my memory. And like I said, my kids and my husband were also telling me how I was always forgetting things, but I wasn't really aware of it. What I was really aware of was the word-finding issue, the word retrieval. I wasn't necessarily aware of the fact that I was forgetting things.
Okay. So when you kind of got stuck in a phrase, trying to figure out a word.
Couldn't find the word in the middle of a sentence, couldn't even throw in another word to exchange for it. It was the word. I knew what the word was, but I couldn't find it. It was like it was mixed up in my brain somewhere. The filing system was messed up, and it was misfiled, so I could not locate it.
Okay, I get that sometimes between my computers and my brain because I'm not all that. I think I'm organized in terms of how I'm going to file something on my computer, but then I surprise myself sometimes to go, well, I guess that wasn't logical at that point in time for me anymore.
Oh yeah,
and I can't find it, and it's frustrating. So I can't even imagine what it's like, to actually live with the disease and have that in your internal computer to be juggling with. Can you tell us a little bit about your exploratory process on figuring out, what was wrong, and did you, how did you start, with the doctor's process, and did you go to a regular GP or did you go to a specialist right off?
Well, I went to see a doctor about an injury to my elbow. And I happened to mention my concern about my memory. I was in the appointment by myself. And this was a doctor that I'd never seen before, but he was part of a practice that I'd been part of for many, many years. And so, in reality, he was a stranger to me, but for some reason it popped into my head to mention about my memory. And like I said, I was only 47 at the time. And for some reason, he took my concerns very seriously, and I have since switched within the practice, and he is my primary care doctor, and that was in 2005.
Well, I think that's great. I know with the experience with my mom, she went to her general practitioner, and he just kind of blew it off to hormones, and that was really a big mistake, and made it much more difficult to address later on down the road, because earlier on she was open to finding out, what was wrong, and then later on she was so sure because the doctor had told her there was nothing wrong. It was really difficult to address, and things, kept progressing, and so it was just too bad. But again, that was a long time ago. My mom's been dealing with her memory problems for 30 years. So
I know. I was thrilled that he took it seriously, that I didn't have to go from doctor to doctor to a doctor, because I've heard of that happening. So I was thrilled that he took it seriously enough that he went with it, because I've even spoken to him since then, and several times, and I said, I don't know where I would be right now if you hadn't taken me seriously. I don't know whether I would have remembered to mention it to somebody else again, or it would have just been left in that office, and who knows? Yeah, because you don't know. You're dealing with a memory impairment, so unless somebody is really advocating for you at that point, you have to be the one to remember to advocate for yourself.
That's a good point. In terms of going to the doctor, if you go by yourself and you are having memory problems or thinking that you are, should you really bring somebody else with you to be able to help you get all the details? Because I would imagine that would be extremely difficult. I mean, it's confusing as it is.
Yep.
when you are tracking everything, to follow all the directions and stuff.
Yeah, data overload.
Yeah, so really bringing an advocate probably wouldn't be, a second pair of ears wouldn't be a bad idea if somebody is open to doing that.
Absolutely, or one of those small tape recorders.
Yeah.
Just let the doctor know that that's what you need because you're not going to remember everything that they're telling you.
Exactly. Now, when you went through the process, do you have any recollection of how you, physically and emotionally felt kind of before you went to the doctor and then after in terms of a comparison?
I think that I was really frightened that what I was experiencing could be Alzheimer's. And I think I remember actually making a joke to my children, oh, God, I hope I don't have Alzheimer's, and just joking about it because I didn't think that's what it was, not at all.
Uh-huh.
I knew that my brain wasn't functioning right, but I figured it must be something else. Like other people, I was way too young, how could that be? I guess it was almost a relief to have a diagnosis because I felt almost as though I was losing my mind without having a diagnosis.
Sure, and that, I hear that quite frequently from people. It is just like you're losing it. And
yep.
Because it doesn't make sense, and when you don't have recollection, you can't put the pictures together,
No, and things don't make sense, and you can't figure out why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Now, do you remember going through the testing process?
Well, I think my regular doctor, when I went there for my elbow, I think they started with blood work and maybe an MRI, and then they sent me to a neurologist. And after spending some time with the neurologist, he said that I needed to have more tests so that he could rule out EOAD, or early onset Alzheimer's, which I believe is when you are diagnosed with Alzheimer's before the age of, 62 or 65, one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that I didn't do so well on the mini mental test he gave me. I think that I had a sleep-deprived EEG, blood work, PET scan, and a sleep study. I was told when I went to get the results that my PET scan resembled an Alzheimer's patient. I actually went home on the computer and Googled it and remembered seeing the PET scan and the neurologist, and I was like, oh, yep, looks just like mine. That's not a good thing.
Oh, geez.
And I think that the PET scan, I think that was the particular test as well as the mini mental testing. I think that's how we came up with the diagnosis.
Okay. And did you share the results with your family right away?
Well, my then husband was there with me at the doctor's appointment. My children were at home, but they knew, we were getting the results of the testing. Two of my best friends and my mom were also waiting for the results. And like I said before, I was relieved to have a diagnosis, and in a way not at all surprised by it. Although hearing the words EOAD from the doctor still devastated me because the words were like there, and there was like no escaping them. My husband and children, they didn't believe the diagnosis, so I guess you could say they were in denial. My children were 23, 19, and 15 at the time of my diagnosis. It was just 6 years ago the other day that my diagnosis was made. My feeling at the time I was diagnosed, well, what happened was I was given a script for Aricept, and I was also told I should get a second opinion because this was just a local neurologist, and he said, because of your age, you should get a second diagnosis, but this is the only diagnosis I can come up with. So I did. I got a second diagnosis, a neurologist in Boston out of Brigham and Women's. And when I went to see him, which took me about 5 or 6 weeks to get an appointment. My feeling at this time was to believe the first diagnosis. And my thought was, if I start thinking that this was incorrect, and then if the second neurologist gave me the same diagnosis, I'd be devastated all over again. And I just couldn't do that to myself again. So for those 5 or 6 weeks that I had to wait for the second appointment, I kept saying, okay, it's EOAD unless you hear anything else. That's it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we'll find out more. But when I went to the second neurologist, I think he's the co-director of neurology at Brigham and Women's, I actually had trouble getting an appointment with him. I remember that. And they said he wasn't taking any new patients. And they said, why did you need to see him? And I told them I was 47, needed a second opinion. And they said, have your first neurologist fax a letter over to us, and we will call you and you can make an appointment. So I called my neurologist right away. They faxed over a letter, and I got an appointment. I believe I got a call that day, and I made the appointment. So I remember that it was sort of a little bit of a process to get me there. But anyway, when I went to see the second neurologist, I brought the testing results, and he sat down, probably did the mini mental thing again with the clock and all kinds of, little stories he's going to tell me and names and words that I should remember. And then I believe they want you to start at 100, subtract 7, and math has never been my strong thing. So I think doing that without a memory impairment would have been a struggle. But I remember the second diagnosis he gave me was what they call amnesic type mild cognitive impairment, and which all I was told and all my research I've done means if I go with the MCI diagnosis, it means I don't have dementia, which means my brain does not function normally for my age. But it means, like for the most part, like I'm living on my own, I'm working, for the most part with MCI, it doesn't impact your life as much, to the degree, as EOAD. So first neurologist to put me on Aricept had terrible leg cramps that took me off. Second neurologist tried it again, the same effect, took me off it. I'm now taking Razodine. I don't really know which diagnosis is the correct, and for a while I drove myself crazy. And where I am 6 years after both diagnoses is I don't care so much about the diagnosis anymore. It's more about how I'm functioning in my everyday life and what I can do to make that easier for me.
Cheryl, I think that's a wonderful decision on your part because it's, society labels. I mean, that's what we do. We label everything and we try to categorize it. And,
yep.
We're all moving parts and things change and science yep. isn't perfect. So I think it's smart to not focus on the label but focus on your life and focus yep. on your abilities and making
yep.
things easiasier. So I think
absolutely.
A fantastic decision.
It was sort of a process I had to go through. It wasn't. It definitely wasn't an overnight kind of thing.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be a struggle, and then to try to. I mean, you sound very positive and upbeat,
yeah.
and like you're really embracing life. And
yep.
anytime somebody gets bad news, I mean, that's not the first place we go. Is the happy camp?
Oh, absolutely. And then when you get two different diagnoses, I mean, which one do you believe? And then at that point, do you go, okay, best out of 3? Do you go to a third neurologist? I mean, what do you do at that point,
Yeah, you can really drive yourself crazy by trying to deny the problem altogether yep. and find someone to tell you everything's okay.
Right. At some point, I had to say, okay, this is what you're dealing with. It's a memory impairment of some kind, something isn't right there. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing that I can come up with. But now you just have to find ways of dealing with it, period.
Since your diagnosis, have you made some changes in your life, and would you mind sharing those with us if you have?
Oh yeah, quite a few. I'm trying to make very positive changes in my life. One was about a year after my diagnosis. I left a very verbally abusive marriage after 27 years. So that is why I live on my own and I work 2 jobs. Most of my days are pretty good, but then again, I could forget some things that are lacking. I want to say some of the things that happen in my life I call like bumps in my road. I'd say the plus side of being diagnosed with a memory impairment is I'm just so more appreciative of my life.
Oh, that's a blessing.
Absolutely.
That's a real gift, and I think so many people these days are not appreciative of what they do have before them, and who's in their life, and all of those types of things.
I don't have time for negativity. I don't have time for all these whining and all these people in bad moods. I just don't have time for it, and I have a lot of patience. It's the only way you can work with kids. I'll work with the public at my other job. And but I don't have time for all this negative stuff and people just being grumpy over nothing. Come on, give me a break.
Yep. No, I get that. With my mom's journey of 30 years, too, it's totally changed my life and what I look at and what I appreciate. And, the big things really don't matter to me at all anymore. It's the little things in my life that are really important to me. And people go, well, how can that be? And I'm like, it's really simple. It's kind of like, if you had a natural disaster, hit your life. When I was in real estate, for example, we would tell people when they were struggling about maybe making a move and having to move to a smaller or a different place, we'd always say, well, we're going to do the 10-minute theory. And that is, you've got 10 minutes before a tornado or a tsunami is going to hit. If you walk into your house, what are you going to grab? What's really important? And it really puts things in perspective that the material things that we have thought have been so important for so many years are no longer. And most people go after, they'll go after maybe their money and their checkbook and their keys, but most of them go after their loved ones, their pets, and their photographs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a real simple, basic things. But I like you, too, focus on the positive. I don't care to be around the negative energy. It just drains me.
I have too much that I want to do in my life, and while I can still do it, I plan on doing it. And I feel like sometimes I'm in a rush to get it done because I don't know when symptoms are going to get worse, and, it's just very unpredictable.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and if something negative happens, I always ask, what's the lesson? What is the lesson in the story? Why is this happening to me, and what am I supposed to learn, and how can I improve not just my life but somebody else's as well in terms of sharing that?
Oh, absolutely. My job is a cashier. Some people that work with me there, they're like, don't the customers drive you crazy? I'm like, no, I get paid for socializing. And the way I look at it is I might be the only person that customer that I have that day, one of those customers, I might be the only person that person talks to that day. I might be the only smiling face, the only person that said a kind word to them all day. And that's just how I look at it.
Well, and that's huge. It's huge. And I think people have forgotten the impact that we have on one another and how important that is. Because, you hear stories all the time of just someone smiling or talking to somebody or stopping to help, how it's been life-changing for that other person.
Yeah, so, what's wrong with just taking a second and out of your day and helping somebody?
Yep, being nice.
Right.
Yep.
Just common respect for other people.
Can you share with us, Cheryl, some of the most difficult things that you've had to deal with regarding the disease itself?
Let's see. One of the most difficult things for me to deal with has been my frustration when my cognition is declining. I have a lot of patience with other people, but sometimes I lose patience with myself. I guess the lack of patience and my frustration can come from people not being able to understand what it's like to live with a memory impairment. They just don't get it, because I guess in a lot of ways there are people at both my jobs that don't have a clue, and I guess in a way that's fine. I really enjoy reading a good book, but have had to give up on that because I can't really follow a storyline from page to page. That happens because of my short-term memory problems. I can still watch a movie. I can still, watch TV. I guess mostly I can read magazines. I can read, chicken soup books, and I can read the same chicken soup book pretty much for many years because I can pick it up 6 months later, and it's a new book for me.
Yeah. Well, that's
some of the stories I might read might sound a little familiar to me, and I'll say, okay, yeah, I can remember a little bit of this.
Okay. How about at work? Have you? Can you tell us maybe how it's affected you at work?
It takes me a while to learn something new. I don't function very well. I've noticed that I don't function very well at multi-step verbal directions or abrupt changes to my schedule. Like a year or two ago, I got in and my case manager needed me to cover a classroom, and I thought I was going to have a meltdown. I was in a classroom that I didn't work in, children I did not know, and a routine I was unfamiliar with. And then another paraprofessional came in, and she did what I was going to be doing because she saw that I was just not going to be able to do it. And I think I got together with my case manager, and she said, how was it? I said, wasn't so good. So we need to talk about this.
Yep.
So if I have changes to my schedule, I need to have some verbal interaction with my case manager or an email letting me know it's coming up. That's all I need, just something letting me know the change is going to happen. At home, I can lose things. Sometimes I probably forget what I've lost, so that's okay. I can look for the remote for the TV, and then I look over, and it's right next to me. So why I'm still looking for it, I don't have a clue, but I just sit here and laugh. What can you do? With my family, I'm not really sure if my children realize how hard some days are for me. I think that I need to start sharing more of my daily struggles with them. I've recently realized that I probably need to do that because I went car shopping with my daughter, and I was the one that needed the vehicle, and she went shopping with me, and the vehicle I was needing to trade in had a flat tire, and the dealership we went to filled it up with air, and we drove back to my daughter's apartment because we were done car shopping for the day. And I dropped her off at her apartment, and it was maybe 10 minutes away. And from the time we left the dealership to her apartment, when she got out of my car, she said, well, talk to you soon. And, we did all this kind of stuff and talked. And she said, Mom, just remember to get your tire, the air checked in your tire, get your tire checked. And I said, Jen, I don't remember which tire it was. She said, Mom, we just left the dealership. I said, Jen, you don't understand what I'm dealing with. I said, sometimes it's moment to moment. So she told me which tire it was because I couldn't remember which side of the car it was. So as I drove back from her apartment to my apartment, I stopped at a red light and I jotted down some notes. And because I was thinking in my head, why doesn't she get it? So when I got home, I started writing, and something really bothers me, I journal about it. And if it's related to a memory impairment, I'll post it onto Memory People and have a lot of activity on it. So this is one of those things that I posted and got a lot of activity on. And it was like one of those light bulb moments, because I said to myself, why doesn't she get it? And as I'm driving home, I'm like, duh, she doesn't get it because you spend all your energy when you're with your kids trying to cover up the symptoms so that they don't worry about it. So I need to try to take some steps into changing that. I haven't quite done that yet. That's going to be a process.
Yeah, that's hard, because I know even with my folks, when I was caring, my dad had brain cancer with my mom with the Alzheimer's, and I found myself in the role of covering up, and I didn't even realize I was covering it up, and I would get so angry sometimes at their friends going, why don't they understand? Why do they ask them to do this? And I'm thinking, well, because they don't have a clue, because you're really not talking honestly about what it's like. And I don't want to. I have one child that lives, my 25-year-old son lives out of state. My youngest son that's in college, he lives about 10 minutes from me, and my daughter lives about 10 minutes from me. But, and I talk to them all the time and see them, but very close to all my kids. But, again, I don't want to. They're young, and I don't want to necessarily have this affect their daily lives, Like I said, I probably need to change some things I'm doing. I just haven't figured all that out yet. Yeah,
well, and that's part of it too, trying to figure out the whole steps kind of thing. I know that I just had dinner with my two children and my son's girlfriend last Wednesday night, I believe it was, because my daughter and my youngest one, they both have July birthdays, so we went out to dinner. And I remember having dinner with them and sitting there and having dinner with them. Oh, actually, my son's girlfriend wasn't there. She had to work. And I remember, you have those conversations and they flow really well. Not with me so much sometimes, because I still remember having those conversations with them just the other night and, couldn't find that word, and said to them, well, I just can't find that word again. You know how that goes. And, we just go on to something else, and another sentence starts, or one of them starts talking about something else.
Yeah, well, and it's important, that you still want to fit in and feel comfortable, and it's a fine line of how much you share and how much you don't, and how much you struggle, and it's
right.
It's not an easy thing to do, because we all want to be accepted for who we are, and there's, no matter how loved we are by people, we still have that fear of
absolutely
being not understood or rejected, and I think that's just something very, very innate within us. But I also feel it's extremely important that we talk openly about this. And I think that's, we're coming of age with this disease, and there's so much more going on, honest conversations where, when we talk honestly about it, we realize we're not alone, and I think that decreases the fear that people have.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think about when I got the diagnosis, and I think about like my really two good friends at the time that I still have, and I thought of them as being supportive. And then when I look at that now, I don't really think that that's true. And I don't want to say that in a bad way, but it's because they don't get it either. I know one of my best friends, when I talk to her about things, sometimes she'll go, oh, that happens to me sometimes too. And can I tell you how much I hate that?
Yeah, and I think that's, a common thing we do, no matter what the issue is, because we're trying to be supportive and trying to make the person not feel alone, and we don't know what else to say. And so
that's probably true.
And so I don't think it's meant as an insult. It's kind of almost like, when you go to a funeral, no one ever knows what to say. And so we all say that, we're sorry for your loss. So I think part of it might be that with people who are actually living with us, if they can give us some things to say or how to deal with it, what would make you feel better? What would make you feel more comfortable? What would be an appropriate response? because we really don't have a clue. We're just trying to be supportive.
It's a learning thing, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, as one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this show was to really bring light to the everyday heroes and change makers, in our world. And one of the first steps, of course, is speaking out and giving voice and being heard. And again, that's what you're doing today, Cheryl. And I can't thank you enough for being part of the show. I really feel blessed to have you with us today. Do you have maybe top 3 recommendations for caregivers on what they could or should do differently that might help people with memory loss? Anything come to mind?
Okay. Well, I would suggest to caregivers to try not to take away skills from the ones who you're caring for, whether it's in the healthcare business or whether you're taking care of somebody at home, but just don't take away a skill that they are still able to do. Perhaps the person you're caring for gets frustrated easily because, like me, sometimes they are unable to do it correctly. But don't always think that they are unable to do the task. Perhaps it just needs to be explained to them a little differently. Or perhaps you just need to show it to them, maybe several times, so they can copy it. I know that takes a lot more patience, a lot more time, but in the end, the result could be the patient's happiness. I feel this, in turn, could make life easier and happier for both the patient and the caregiver. I would say when spending time with a memory-impaired person, please treat them with respect and dignity. Don't belittle what they say. It's important to them. Make them feel that it is important to you. I would also say that having a consistent routine, I know it helps me function better. If I get up in the morning and I get up, like I have acid reflux, so I get up, I take my pill, I wait a half an hour. Actually, I set the timer for 30 minutes. 30 minutes is up. I have breakfast. If after breakfast I forget to take my medication and instead I take a shower, I then run the risk of forgetting to take my medication. So everything has to be done in an orderly fashion. It helps me to function. It's also helpful if things are well organized, clutter reduced. Things that are used quite frequently are not moved around a lot, but left in the same place to make it easier to find. I often say that there's a lot of benefits to living alone and having a memory impairment because I live alone. If anything's going to get moved in my apartment, it's going to get moved by me. So if something gets moved, I go, oh, well, who moved it? Oh, duh, you live alone. So, there's those moments that you go, oh, okay, that was me. All right. I've thought about, rearranging some things in my apartment, but I think I moved in here about 2.5 years ago, and I think about, moving things around. And then I go, well, it might be something small in a cabinet, but I'm not sure that will work because in the long run, I may remember where I moved it when I first moved in. I won't remember where I moved it a week ago. So then you have, issues with that.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and I think that's great that you're aware of that too. And even though that you might want to change things up, you know to live your life on a daily basis, it might not be the best thing to do. The other thing I liked what you said about not taking away skills that people have, it kind of reminds me of, when you're teaching a child to make a bed or go potty, we're so thrilled. And it's not perfect, but everybody's happy.
That's right.
Because they're trying and they're doing the best they can and they feel empowered. And I personally think we have to get rid of a lot of this judgment and, that we think things have to be done in a certain way, and they don't. When I do
don't have to be perfect.
No. And most of the time they're not. I do some age sensitivity training. I go into the high schools, and one of the exercises that is so funny that we do, and it happens every time I do it, I have them put on a pair of ski gloves, and then there's coins on the table, and they're supposed to pick the coins straight up. And they can't with the gloves, and the gloves are there to kind of show that if somebody has arthritis. And so they're trying to pick these coins up, and they can't do it because they're ski gloves and they're thick. And in every class, it's never failed, there's one student that will scoop the coins up in their hands, and then they slide them over to the edge of the table, and then they catch them in the other glove. And they say, I did it. And then all the other students scream out, well, you didn't do what she said. And I said, but that's perfect, because life is about adapting.
That's true.
It's not about how we do something. It's not about the steps. It's about accomplishing the task.
Right. And I want to say that I probably use that with my students, that if they are able to do something, I'm not doing it for them. Like if I have a student that, they can get the ideas flowing and they have issues with getting the ideas on the paper, if they will dictate it to me, I will write it for them. Mm-hmm. But if I have another student that they are very capable of writing it, I will not scribe for them.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I will not take that skill away from them.
Yeah. When my daughter was, I think, in 5th grade, she would come home, and I remember my mom talking about the new math, even when I was in school, and she'd go, Dean, get in here. I don't know this new math, and then my daughter was in 5th grade, and she would come home just in tears going, I don't understand this math. And she just couldn't get it. And I said, okay, well, let's do it this way. Let's add it up differently. There's more than one way to get to. No, the teacher says it has to be done this way. I'm like, honey, it's about getting the answer. It's about completing the task.
That's right.
And so, I met with the teacher, and I said, can you please explain to these kids that there is more than one way. I understand you're teaching a method, but not everybody gets the method. And it's truly about the answer. And so
that's right.
It was kind of an amazing process to me here. Do you have any advice for caregivers, kind of a best advice for a caregiver to share with us, if they're maybe worried about someone's memory or maybe themselves, what should they do? What would you recommend?
Well, I'd say if you probably think there's a problem, or if somebody in your family or friends are saying, maybe you should have this looked at, that you probably need to have it looked at by a doctor, and start with your primary care doctor. And if you, like you were talking about, Lori, maybe if you're not confident about going by yourself, then have somebody go with you.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. It's just so overwhelming, all the details, and what I've heard, there really isn't a standard practice for how someone is told and what information they're gotten or given, and it's kind of all over the board depending on who you go see. If it's a general practitioner, or if it's a neurologist, up front. Or maybe the GP has knowledge in that area, but it's when I've interviewed people, it's just been all over the board. From they said the words and then they said goodbye, we'll see in 6 months, and it's like, well, what does that mean, and where do I go? To others that have really sat and explained that this is not a life-threatening process. Yes, there's going to be changes, and here's the support services to tap into, and this is a game plan. And those are two big variables in terms of...
Oh, yeah. No, they give you nothing. They just give you the diagnosis and next patient.
Yeah. And that's hopefully that will be changing here in the future with, the NAPA, the National Alzheimer's Program that they're putting together. Hopefully they'll have some...
They need to change that, but that needs to start right with the medical school, that they're, the upcoming doctors and nurses, they've got to train them right away to realize that.
I agree. It's not just...
You don't give somebody a life-changing diagnosis for something that there is no cure for, or something that is going to change your life tremendously, and not give them like a toolkit that's going to help them cope.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything that they gave you, and I don't know whether, I'm not sure why that happens. My guess is they don't know what to do for you.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trained to give you medication to help you, but they don't know what else to do for you.
Yeah, the social side of it and the tapping into the resources. I know for myself, I've had, and this isn't memory loss, but I've had a couple of lumps in my breasts, and it's really scary, and they go in and they do the test, and then they do another test, and it's 3 and 4 weeks out every time you do a test, and time's ticking, and I'm just pulling out my gray hairs as I'm going.
Oh my God.
And and it's horrible because you have to wait so long for an appointment like you did for your second appointment is just ridiculous because all that stress is just exhausting, to say the least. And your mind wanders, and then you get on the internet and you start Googling, and of course we only pick up the negative stuff on anything, with that, and it's devastating. And then all of a sudden, like for me, with this lump, I mean, everything was fine, but it was like 3 months of just total stress. And we can't, with memory loss in particular, I mean, we can't add that stress to people going through this. It just, because it just makes it so much more difficult to deal with.
Oh yeah, stress is not something that's our best friend, that's for sure.
Yep. Do you have any words of wisdom for someone who has just gotten diagnosed?
Can I put you on hold just for 1 second? I just thought of something. I just want to write it down real quick that I'm going to share with you in a minute. Hold on.
Sure, not a problem. So when Cheryl she puts us on hold, I am just going to read us another little quote, one that I just think is very interesting. And it says, "The hardest arithmetic to master is the one that enables us to count our blessings." The hardest arithmetic to master is the one that enables us to count our own blessings. And that's by Eric Hoffer. And I just thought that is so good because many times we just don't appreciate what it is that we have.
That is so true. That is so true. Could you just repeat your last question, Lori, please?
Oh, sure. I was just wondering if you had any words of wisdom for somebody who's just got diagnosed.
Well, I guess what I can say, what's worked for me, I guess I wake up every morning with a positive attitude. And I think what I said earlier, I try to avoid negative people. I just don't have time for it. Can't waste my energy on them. Mm-hmm. I have too much that I want to do in my life, and I just don't know how much time that I'll be able to do it. I'd say the big thing is to reduce the stress in your life as much as you can. Surround yourself with people who will be there to support you and who will love you no matter what. I would say take one day at a time. Don't look at the big picture, but small things one at a time. Try not to take on too much at once. Enjoy your life to the fullest. And again, try to do things that give you the most joy. As hard as it may be sometimes, try very hard to keep a positive attitude. I think that attitude is very important. I think it affects how other people interact with you, and it affects, everything.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Would you mind? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can I just add something?
Sure.
I guess some of that, which is what I just said to you, was something that I just jotted down. It might be a little bit repetitive, but I think over the past maybe year or two, I've realized that there are at least 3 things in my life that I know increases my symptoms. I don't know how long it took me to recognize it, because that in itself is a memory issue. Too much stress in my life, big thing. Adds to my symptoms, incredible. too many work hours. I was actually 2.5 years ago working 60 hours, 7 days a week, as opposed to 6 days a week, 52.5 hours. So I had to cut back, but I could only cut back so much. And the other thing is just doing too much. I was working 52.5 hours. I was bowling in a bowling league, and I was coaching a bowling league. And this past spring, I just gave up coaching after 20 years because I needed to have less scheduled time, less structured time. I need more free time to just do what I feel like doing. And then my bowling league, which I enjoy, I'm going to give that up in the fall also so that I can have less scheduled time again. So,
well, I think that's really important, that you shared that with people. I mean, that's fantastic information for people to understand, both people living with the disease and caregivers as well, in terms of...
Those two things are really hard to give up because it's hard to give up something. It's easy to give up something that you don't enjoy doing, but it's all that much harder to give up things that you really enjoy and you really put a lot of heart and soul into it. So, especially the coaching that I've enjoyed for 20 years, I still will miss doing that, but I just have to do what's best for me right now.
Yep. Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, that's been a big part of your life, and I don't know if there's a way that you can still go up there and help out when it's appropriate by working with other coaches or not, or if it's just best just to stay away. And you're the only one that'll be able to figure that out. And I imagine every situation is different, and same with bowling. If you're not going to do it all the time, and I don't know if it would be more stressful to be called in as a filler when they need somebody to, but I'm sure you've given thought to that as well, and will do whatever works for you, and you should do, what works for you. Yeah. So, Cheryl, I appreciate you sharing all this information with us. I was wondering, if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience, how you are making a difference with dementia. And I know, just by being on the show is going to help a lot of people, you sharing your story and them being able to hear your activity on Memory People, I know has helped me immensely along with others. But why don't you just, put it in your own words, what you're doing to help others?
Well, I guess one of the ways I'm helping others is by sharing my story. I've been active through the Alzheimer's Association, part of, I forget what it's called, early onset group.
Okay.
And I've spoken at 2 Alzheimer's-sponsored events called Mapping Through the Maze down in Massachusetts. I've done that twice. And you just basically sit as a memory-impaired person or with a caregiver, and you answer questions. Sometimes they're prepared questions, which work out really well, and then there are other questions that the audience will have for you. And like you said, I'm very active on Memory People. If I'm having a difficult day or days, I might post on Memory People how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'm actually not active on there at all. So it all depends on how I'm doing. Then I am the one receiving the love and support. And although I would prefer to give the support rather than be the one needing it, it's just not a role I'm happy being in. I guess you'd rather be the caregiver than the patient, We're almost 1,000 members strong. And I want to say, before Memory People on Facebook that Rick Phelps started, I didn't have a support group. There isn't anything for me here. I had hardly anyone to talk to who really understood what it was like to live with a memory impairment. That made me feel alone and isolated. I don't feel that way anymore. That is just a big piece that's just been lifted since November last year.
Very neat. That's very neat.
I am an Alzheimer's advocate. I've traveled to Washington, D.C. over the past 2 years to attend the policy forum conferences. The last day we meet with legislators to ask them, the ones from our home states, and we let them know what policies that we need or acts that we need them to jump on and support. And we do that by sharing our own personal stories. I know in May when I got back from Washington, D.C., I was looking for some paperwork related to my job and getting my recertification as a para done, and I stumbled across a journal that I had written some 6 years ago that I had forgotten even existed, let alone that I still had it. And although I cried when I read it because the journal was written 6 years ago when I got the diagnosis of EOAD, it then dawned on me that I had to make a video about it. And public speaking is not something that I've ever enjoyed doing. I've always avoided it. But when it comes to this disease, I have to put that in the background and say, well, suck it up and do it, because it means too much to me to have somebody else suffer and not have the support that they need.
I think that is wonderful, and I've seen you on video, Cheryl, and you do a fantastic job. So you really have nothing to worry about. You really
Thank you, Laurie.
Come off very sincere and just, this is me, and that's what it's about. It's, people don't want to hear all the fluff. They want to hear, what's it really like from someone who really knows. Because the rest of us out here, we're just guessing.
Yep.
And I've been with this, like I said, 30 years with my mom, but I'm still guessing. I think my guesses are getting a little better, over time, but I still don't know, and so it's just so nice to hear the spoken word or the written word from those actually living and breathing the disease. So I totally applaud you for what you're doing, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your story with us here on Alzheimer Speaks Radio. If people are interested in contacting you, Cheryl, are you open to them reaching out to you at all?
Sure, they could reach me on my email, and it's bowl, BOWL, dash, coach, COACH, at Comcast.net.
Okay, wonderful. So that's bowl, and then a dash, and then coach at Comcast.net. Well,
that is correct.
Well, thank you again for being with us, Cheryl. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show then.
Well, Laurie, I want to thank you for asking me to be a part of your show today.
Well, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you again. So for the
You're
rest
welcome.
Great. For the rest of our listeners here, I hope you'll help us spread the word about our show today. And you can just go to our homepage and you can like us, you can friend us, you can email, you can tweet about us, tell your friends and coworkers, because again, we need your help to get awareness spread. Our next show is going to be on the 29th, and Sherry Fisher and Tom O'Neill are both caregivers, and they are going to talk about shifting caregiving from crisis to comfort. And then on August 3rd, we're going to have Gerald Cummings and Mary Frances Price, who are both attorneys. One is from California and one is from Minnesota, and they're going to be talking about planning for the future on estate planning. And then on the 4th of August, I can't believe we're going to be in August already pretty soon, is Joe Skillion, author of Confessions of a Caregiver, When Alzheimer's Comes to Your Home. So I hope you'll be able to join us in the future episodes. If not, you can always listen to them because they are archived. So again, just go to the homepage. And if you're memory impaired and interested in telling your story to the world, please email me. I would love to talk to you, and maybe you can be our next guest. Again, this is just a laid-back, comfortable session. All we're doing is talking on the phone, like good friends visiting, and just sharing your experience. So I hope you decide to come back and become an advocate on steroids for Alzheimer's disease. And we look forward to having great conversations, learning, laughter, as we maneuver this roller coaster called dementia on Friday, July 29th at 7 p.m. And that's Central Time, so it'd be 8 p.m. Eastern Time or 5 p.m. Pacific Time for Real Talk, Shifting Caregiving from Crisis to Comfort. And remember, please focus on the 3 simple things your memory chip teaches you. Are they safe? Are they happy? Are they pain-free? And you can get your free memory chip at www.alzheimersspeaks.com. Have a blessed day and enjoy your weekend. Bye now.